Greetings and welcome to another Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team video, where today I'm going over the stats show for Kill Team. But before getting into things, please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of today's video if you found it useful and helpful. And remember, I've got a Discord you can check out for free in the episode description below, an affiliate link at Element Games, an affiliate link and discount code at Crossfire Games, and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. But yeah, once again, we're doing the monthly stats for Kill Team. So this is for the stats of all of July. Once again, this was all compiled by Smiles Lies Gunfire from the Best Coast Pairings app, as well as anyone who is submitting us data. Once again, you know, we break everything down for you, and if you haven't submitted us data, if you let us know, we can add it as well. And we also filter out stuff like leagues, fake events, that kind of stuff, because only you get a lot of weird results with Kill Team. And remember, we do like put draws as half a win. So it's like a win is 1 point, a draw is half a point. And yeah, so let's get into it. There will be an article version down in the episode description below, which links to the stats website, where you can look into stuff like faction metrics, all that kind of like which faction is doing better against which. But let's get into the video. So starting off with July stats, we have America with 34 events and 458 players. Then the UK with 9 events and 225. And then Spain with 7 events and 157 players. Then going down as expected. We've got some new places like Malaysia. And then, you know, we've got Turkey, Peru, Indonesia, New Zealand. And then, as you can see on the world map, we've got a nice total list of world events for July. Still a bit of a quiet month in terms when it comes to July, but we're still seeing a lot of growth when it comes to events and players, which is good to see for Kill Team as a whole. Going into July win rates, we have Novitiate starting us off at an 83% win rate, but with only 12 games. Then you've got Galapox with a 78% win rate, but with only 9 games. Then going into the more reliable stuff, we have Sanctifiers on a 62% win rate with 108 games. Vespid, oddly, at 59% with 76 games, which is a bit on the low side. Then Aquilons at 59% with 203 games. Warp Coven at 58 with 103. Blades of Cain at 57 with 122. Brood Brothers at 57 with 130. And then Hierotech with 57 on 197. Now, this is all pre-Balance Dataslate. We've actually filtered out the events that were specifically using the new Balance Dataslate, and we'll include them for next month. So this is all prior data. Then you've got Corsairs sitting at 55. Remember, 55 to 45 is the golden range. Like, ideal. Generally, everyone is actually, we've got more teams now in the healthy range. Oddly, Hunter Clade had a really nice month. Only 23 games, but a 50% win rate. Then you've got stuff like Rattlings doing a lot better this month. 75 games at a 48% win rate. They were doing pretty bad overall in the last few months. Goremongers at 47% with 215 games, but the most popular faction still Nemesis. Well, it was Angels of Death, but this time it's Nemesis Claw, then Raveners, then Angels of Death. Raveners nearly 300 games, 54% win rate, and Nemesis Claw at 313 games with a 53% win rate as well. Now at the bottom end we have Blooded and Mandrakes, both at like 46 and 45%, and then Chaos Cult just at 45, but with only 37 games. Dropping below 45, we have Battleclade, who have just started to underperform a bit at 44% with 198 games. Felgor doing a lot better at 43% with only 46 games though. Angels of Death technically doing better than last month at 42%. Then we have Commandos doing better at 42, Hand of the Archon doing a bit better at 42, Deathcore dropping down to 40%, Pathfinders dropping down to 39, Halfkin dropping down to 38, Scouts at 37, Starstriders at 35, and then Kazakin, 27%, well, 28%. Oddly, Imperial Navy Breachers are at 50%, but with only 12 games. So here it is, as you can see with the chart. So we've got a bit mover and shakers. We actually do have a wider range of healthy teams this month, but you've still got the insane peaks and like low points. So it's not as great. And as you can see in the chart, you know, the higher the color, the more popular a faction is, which makes those games more reliable. But we had 2,000 games, well, 2,100 games for this month, which is about average. You know, still pretty good with a nice spread of events and players. Then for podium data, so when it's, because there's so many events in the general, you know, stats. So it's how many times a faction won an event, how many times they went undefeated, and how many times they were picked. So as you can see, that's the chart here. And then going into the graph, Aquilons were actually the best performing team when it came to podium data. They won 7 events and then podiumed 4 times. Well, like, then Hierotech won 6 events with 4 other players going undefeated. Then you had Raveners winning 6 events, going undefeated 3 times, showing like even though the win rate's just okay, they are kind of dominating events. Plague Marines won 5 events, Warp Coven won 5 events, Nemesis Claw won 4 events and went undefeated 7 times, Vespid and Angels of Death won 3 events. Commandos, Rattling, Sanctifies, Blades of Cain won 2 events, along with Phobos, Wreckers, Exaction, and Corsairs, Goremongers, and Felgor. Void Dancer Troop, Battleclade, Farstalker, Kimber, Novitiates, Pathfinders, Mandrakes, Scouts, Chaos Cult, Brood Brothers, Inquisition, and Galapox all won 1 event, and then Legionary, Blooded, Jaegers, and Halfkin all went undefeated. So we actually have a nice spread, although it's still just every event, and usually we had more teams podiuming or just winning, so it's getting a bit narrower. Now we go into GT Plus, so these are for events with 4 or more rounds and 16 or more players. This is the more competitively considered part of Kill Team because, you know, these are more competitive events. So you've got Galapox with a 100% win rate with 5 games and 5 wins. And it's fine, don't worry about it. Sanctifiers on 62 games with a 63% win rate. Breachers with 4 games and a 62.5% win rate. Hunterclade with 8 games on a 63% win rate. And then getting to more reliable stuff. Blades of Cain with 60 games on a 62% win rate. Brood Brothers on a 60% win rate with 78 games. Warp Coven on 58% with 69, which is nice. And then Wormblade, 57 but 15 games. Aquilons, 56% with 86 games. And then Hierotech, 56 with 98 games. Then we've got a nice wide healthy range there. Oddly, Hind of the Archon doing a lot better when it comes to GT Plus. Angels of Death just at 45% with 127 games. Deathcore do a bit better at 43 but with only 15 games. Rattlings drop down to 41%. Scouts are at 40%. Felgor dropped down to 39. Exaction dropped down to 38. Chaos Cult crashed down to 36. Kazakin go up to 36. Pathfinders go down to 33, Halfkin go down to 31, Starstriders crash to 25, and Commandos drop to a 7% win rate with 29 games. So here is it in chart format, and you can see it's a lot wonkier. Now, obviously, there are less games in GT+, but it looks when the game gets more competitive, it gets crazier. So there's more overperforming teams, but there are a lot more underperforming teams, and the underperforming teams underperform really badly, like especially Commandos. I think this is Commandos' worst month ever, especially in GT Plus, and this is with over 1,000 games. So interesting spread when it comes to GT Plus. Then here's the podium data for GT Plus. So as you can see, all the stuff from before. So looking at the chart, you can see Aquilons won 2 events and then podiumed twice. Sanctifiers won 2 events along with Warp Coven, all podiuming twice. Then Plague Marines won 2 events but only podiumed once. Blades of Cain podiumed once, went undefeated once and won an event. Then Brood Brothers, they podiumed 4 times and won 1 event. Raveners podiumed 3 times and won 1 event. Battleclade podiumed 3 times and won 1 event. Hierotech podiumed twice and won 1 event. Goremongers podiumed once and won an event, with Angels of Death, Vespid, and Galapox all winning event. Then Phobos podiumed 3 times, along with Wreckers, Void Dancer Troop, and Legionary podiuming twice, with Nemesis Claw, Blooded, and Hunterclade podiuming once. And then if you look at the 3 and 1 spike, so this is how many times a faction went a maximum of 1 loss with at least 3 or more wins. You can see like Brood Brothers had the highest spike of this, probably, which is why they got nerfed, along with Plague Marines, and then actually Goremongers spiking really high for second. Phobos had a really high 3-1 ratio as well, but basically even Legionary did quite, Nemesis Claw did quite well in this, but it generally correlates with how well a faction is podiuming. So interesting podium data there. Then for GT Long, so this is for events with 30 or more players and 5 or more rounds. This is just for like the more competitive majors. There were only 2 GT Long events this month. So first were Blooded with 14 games and a 71% win rate. Corsair with 7 games and a 71% win rate. Void Dancer Troop with 11 games and a 68% win rate. Wormblade with 11 games, 64. Then Hierotech at 49 games with a 62% win rate. Aquilon only with 18 games at 61%. Warp Coven at 15 games with 60%. Phobos 22 games, 59%. Sanctifiers at 59%, dropping down to only 22 games. Then Plague Marines at 59% with 34 games. Brood Brothers at 56% with 16 games. Goremongers at 56 with 43 games. Then you have Nemesis Claw all the way down to Raveners in the healthy range. And then you have Battleclade just at 44% with 34 games. Angels of Death at 44% with 58 games. Hand of the Archon still actually doing a bit better in GT Long with 43% and 14 games. Rattlings 36% with 14 games. Deathcore 36 with 7 games. Felgor crashing down to 27 but with only 15 games. Then it was against Action Squad and Star Striders with 4 games at 25% win rate. Chaos Cult at a 14% win rate with 7 games. Halfkin at 9% win rate with 11 games. Commandos at 9% win rate with 17 games. Then Pathfinders with the legendary 0% win rate with 7 games. So here is the chart version. Obviously, there's going to be a lot less factions at GT Long because there's not many of these kind of events. And it's still very wonky. This time, there's hardly any teams in the healthy range. Most factions are either overperforming or underperforming. But this is kind of hard to judge because it's only 354 games. You know, it's still a limited pool, but my gosh, we finally got 0%. Does this mean we need to buff Pathfinders? No, I think we need to remove another operative for them. But generally, like, Bloodeds did quite well over 2 GT Long events. Corsairs and Void Dancers doing a lot better in GT Long, which has kind of been quite how that mirrors for them. Hierotek and Sanctifier still doing persistently well at GT Long. These are factions that have always done well at these kind of events. But just an interesting spread overall. Battleclade actually doing a lot better in GT Long, which kind of makes sense with how that team works. And even Raveners just barely sit above 45% at GT Long, so maybe they're not as terrifying as people seem. And then here's the GT Long podium data. So Hierotek and Plague Marines podiumed twice, so they both won an event. They both won a GT Long event because there's only 2 GT Longs. Then Wreckers, Legionary, Blooded, and Warp Coven all podiumed once each. Goremongers had the highest 3-1 ratio, then followed by Angels of Death and Nemesis Claw. Actually, most of these were doing quite well here. And then the other 3-1 ratios were Brood Brothers at 2, but then you had Raveners, Corsairs, Battleclade, Void Dancer, Troop, Blades of Cain, Mandrakes, Wormblade, and Jaegers all at 1. So very interesting spread here. Not much you can get when it's only 2 events, but GT Long is always interesting to just look at to see how factions are doing in the truly long-form competitive style events. Now here is the GT Plus data for Quarter 2. So this is all the Quarter 2 compiled data. Basically looking at the stats and seeing, was Games Workshop kind of right in what they did? So Sanctifiers was 62% with 378 games. Hierotek were at 62% at 381 games. Galapox were at 59% but only 17 games, which most of those were Orion. Blades of Cain at 59% with 229 games. Warp Coven at 58% at 257 games. Then you had Raveners just kind of just at the top end of healthy with 119 games at 54%. Looking, you had Aquilans at 54%. Chaos Con and Brood Brothers both at like just around 54%. Goremonger sitting at 52. Battleclade sitting at 49% with 100 games. Hunterclade doing pretty alright at 49% with only 40 games. And then going down, you had Plague Marines at 47%, and then Deathcore and Angels of Death both around 45%, with Angels of Death at 573 games, just being the most popular faction, then followed by Goremongers. So looking at below 45, we had Inquisition at just 44%, but only 71 games. Then Vespid at 44 with 112 games. Scout at 40%, Star Striders at 40, Hand of the Archon at 40, Felgor at 39, Halfkin at 39, Rattlings at 37, Farstalker Kimben at 34, Kazakin at 31, Commandos at 31, and Breachers at 26% with only 25 games for the 3 months of Kill Team. Only 20, but this is GT Plus. These are more the competitive events. Here it is in chart format. So looking at GT Plus, actually, we looked like we actually had a wider range of healthy teams, which was pretty good. Most teams actually pretty close to 45 or 55%, which was really good. We only had 5 overperforming teams, which are Sanctifiers, Hierotek, Galapox, Blades of Cain, and Warp Coven. When you just look at win rates, and then underperforming teams, we still had quite a lot. Right, we still had Vespid, Scout, Star Striders, Hand of the Archon, Felgor, Halfkin, Rattlins, Farstalker, Kazakid, Breachers, and Commandos. And outside of Breachers, none of those got buffs. Like, don't think it was Elites holding all of those back, but we had 4,200 games for the entire quarter at GT Plus, which is very, very good. That's actually a rise on an increasing rise for the competitive size events, but looks like a healthy spread-ish when you look at the win rates. So here's the podium data. So how many golds, how many times a faction was picked, undefeated, all that kind of stuff. And in the chart where it's all kind of averaged out, kind of showing how many times a faction placed and won an event. Hierotech were the best faction in the game. Then it was Sanctifiers, then Nemesis Claw when it came to combined win rate, but also podium data. Then Phobos, Goremongers, Aquilons, Brood Brothers, Legionary, and then Plague Marines. And then dropping below that, just above the healthy line was Warp Coven, and just below was Angels of Death. Angels of Death were really carried in like general events, like 3-round events for how much they were podiuming. They weren't really like, they were sometimes winning 3-round events, but kind of tapered off when you went to longer events. And then for the bottom end, like these factions aren't great. You have technically Blooded, Chaos Cult, Vespid, Hand of the Archon, Felgor, Novitiates, Felgor, Farstalker Kinband, Gallowpox, Inquisition, Rattlings, Halfkin, Mandrakes, Hunterclade, Breachers, Wormblade, Commandos, Deathcore, and Kazakin. Now this was more due to their podium data over their win rate. So it shows like when you're taking these factions aren't really likely to podium or win an event. And it's quite stark how quickly it changes, which is worrying, but I'm sure all of this will change for the next quarter. And then this is just the list of events we used for the entire month of July. So for the July stats overview, it's kind of not really changed. Obviously, the Balance Dataslate just dropped, and we couldn't see much of an effect going into like this month, like because it's just like barely a week of games. Not many, because a lot of events weren't using the Balance Dataslate because they'd already locked in advance, right? So it wasn't too much of a change, but we saw some interesting spikes, you know, like Gallowpox oddly doing a bit better, like very better, not just a bit. But you had some interesting things with how like Brood Brothers, despite just like they were overperforming overall and in GT Long, but then in GT Plus they were just doing fine, but they had a really great podium data. They only won one event, but they did really well at podiuming at events and going 3-1. Goremongers consistently like terrify events. Raveners look like they may be becoming the new Goremongers because they have a high ratio of players and podium data. I was actually chatting to Smiles, Lies and Gunfire about this. At the current projected rate, because you can kind of project how the stats are going a bit, it looks like Raveners will end up being the most popular game, or the most popular kill team in the game, and their win rate is very high. But more concerning is their podiuming data. Like they are really doing well at winning events and podiuming events. Now they do have a very interesting like toxic playstyle, so we'll have to see how that tapers out. But then Rattling's doing a bit better this month. They did really badly in the last 2 months, but overall it hasn't helped them back. Like doing well in July hasn't balanced out them doing badly in the prior 2 months. Felgor actually did a little bit better. Angels of Death did a bit better this month, but were just worse overall, and obviously they've been nerfed. Pathfinders did worse this month as well, notably. Like Starstriders has really crashed down quite a bit, but it's not really surprising considering they're an unpopular team in a bad meta, and kind of Battleclade are just better version of them. Speaking of Battleclade had a great month. They're still starting to underperform a little bit, but they actually do better at long format events, which was interesting to see. Nemesis Claw, this is probably the last month they're going to dominate as well as they have when it comes to casual events, as well as podiuming data. They've been hit quite hard, so it'll be surprising to see if they can continue this. Blades of Cain doing amazing. They should continue to dominate along with Aquilons. Aquilons have a really high podium data, which is also quite worrying. So they're probably going to be a problem in the future. And, you know, Legionary were just doing okay, but Legionary are going to obviously drop down. Inquisition were doing a lot better this month, and they're going to rise as well. Farstalker Kinban, unfortunately, were doing really badly, and I can't see that changing. Hierotech will do well. Like, this is... When it comes to like Hierotech and Sanctifiers, we were in this period where a lot of like players were staying off them because they thought they were going to get destroyed in the Balance Dataslate, and they haven't. They're still really strong. So it's going to probably pick up more with those factions when we get to like the end of August, because we'll have Nova and the WTC. We have a lot more bigger events coming now. So because of the Balance Dataslate, we're expecting Hierotech and like Sanctifiers to jump up in win rate, along with like basically Goremongers. Goremongers are a big problem, but Goremonger players seem to be terrified of Raveners, so we'll see how that shakes up. Plague Marines are still solid, and I think they'll just still be this solid meta check. They're a very popular team, So it'll be interesting to see how the entire month spreads out. Records did a lot better this month. They're just getting closer to just being okay, but they're a really difficult team to gauge. It'll be interesting to see how Phobos do, because they've lost a lot of their burst aggression. So it'll be interesting to see if they can still dominate like this consistently podiuming team that does better at long format events. And then obviously Vespid had a really good month. If elites continue to disperse and more horde teams come up, Vespid should actually be pretty okay. They are getting more and more popular, but we'll see. This is the first month they've spiked. They've been actually doing pretty badly overall, and when you get to longer format events, they're not that great. So overall, an interesting month just to see how it ended. Obviously, it does not correlate with what happened in the Balance Dataslate, really, but Games Workshop basically admitted themselves they were kind of in their own world when it came to the Balance Dataslate. So, you know, it was just interesting to see what would have happened if they more closely used the stats, which they have done previously. But remember, thanks goes to Smile Eyes and Gunfire. You can find the stats website in the episode description below. This will be updated like either today or a few days after this video. And in that stats website, you can look at stuff like matchup metrics. But it's all thanks to Smile Eyes Gunfire, because without him, none of this would be possible. But please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Remember, I've got a Discord you can check out for free in the episode description below, and a affiliate link at Among Games, and a affiliate link and discount code at Crossfire Games, and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. And I'm just going to shout out my patrons. So for my adults of the crit, I have Tom, the Houston Toad, Super Cow, Nick, Mercenary Q, Mr. Meatwad, Marshall, Lucas, Graham, Fangzu, Draken, Dan, Dada Goldens, Chris, Alex, Amorphium, and Alexis. So thank you so much for all your support. It really means a lot to me and helps support the channel. I'll be back with some more videos soon. I've actually just come back from America, had a bit of a break. Yes, I'm always in America. Isn't that nice? Yes, I'm so eggy. But yeah, it's interesting to see how this meta shakes out. I'm really confused about the current meta because elites were hit so hard. It's going to be interesting how things shake up. Like I'm personally predicting the rise of Sanctifiers and Hierotek along with Goremongers. Raveners are going to be a big problem. Like my big tip is Raveners aren't as undefeatable as people say, but you really need to plan into Raveners. You have to plan into Raveners. And I think once more people plan into them, it should be okay. But a lot of teams can't deal with their stat checking. But I'll have some more interesting meta videos out soon. But remember, no matter what the stats say, you always have a chance to win as long as you can roll a crit.